If we look at this from, a legal point of view, she is not going to put something out there that she doesn't truly believe in. Evidently, this is an investigation that has spanned many, many years. She's very detailed and forensic. So I think Meghan Markle will be panicking because at the end of the day, Dan, things don't make sense with Meghan Markle. That's a fact.
There are moments in this ongoing royal story, and there have been many where you find yourself sitting very still, leaning slightly forward and thinking, this is it. This is the moment where the carefully constructed wall finally begins to crack. This is one of those moments, because right now, something is brewing. Something that the people closest to Meghan Markle's past have apparently been tracking for the better part of a decade. Something that her PR machine, her legal team, and the loyal circle of media allies who have protected her narrative for years will not be able to simply spin away. Tom Bower, the award-winning investigative biographer who spent years methodically dissecting Meghan's past for his explosive book Revenge, has been warning for some time that the questions about her pre-royal life do not add up, that the gaps in her story are not accidental, that the years she spent hustling her way through Hollywood, the money, the travel, the connections to some very powerful, very secretive circles deserve serious, sustained scrutiny. And now, it appears the scrutiny is finally coming. An 8-year investigation into Meghan Markle's hidden past is close to dropping. 8 years of sources collected. 8 years of testimony gathered from people she has, allegedly, treated abominably. 8 years of tracking what is being called a deliberate, systematic cover-up. The investigator behind it has kept meticulous records. She has the receipts. And according to those watching this story closely, Meghan Markle knows it. The question is, what exactly is she afraid of? Stay with me, because by the time we are done today, you will understand not just what is being alleged, but why it matters so much, why the mainstream media has refused to touch it, and why Tom Bower's forensic examination of her pre-royal life means that when those answers finally come, the world will already have the context to understand them fully. There is a version of the Meghan Markle story that the public was sold. It was a beautiful story, truthfully. A self-made American actress, biracial, fiercely independent, who captured the heart of a prince and walked into the most famous royal family in the world. She was modern, she was inspiring. She was, or so we were told repeatedly, exactly what the monarchy needed. Tom Bower did not believe that story. Not because he went looking for reasons to disbelieve it, he is too disciplined a journalist for that, but because when he spent years interviewing over 80 sources for Revenge, Meghan, Harry and the war between the Windsors, what kept emerging was something quite different from the fairy tale. What emerged was the portrait of a woman with, as Bower's sources described her, 2 distinct characters, one concealed, one fictional. A woman with what one source memorably called a baffling tendency to switch from idolizing to belittling. A woman who, Bower concluded, had been fighting tooth and nail for the things she wanted in life long before Harry ever came along, and who had left a considerable trail of casualties in her wake. That word casualties is one Bower returned to repeatedly. In his own words, the truth about Meghan is that she will always find a way she thinks she can win, and the casualties are irrelevant. Whether a father, old best friends, or a first husband, there will always be casualties. The only remaining question, Bower said, was when Harry would become one of them. That is the intellectual framework that Tom Bower has spent years building. Not tabloid sensationalism, not anonymous gossip. A methodically researched, legally vetted examination of who Meghan Markle actually is, as opposed to who she has very carefully arranged for the world to believe she is. And it is against that backdrop that the current story must be understood, because what is happening now is not simply a fresh round of royal gossip. It is the potential unravelling of a cover-up that, if the investigators are right, has been actively maintained for the better part of a decade.
The mainstream media have not reported on the fact Meghan Markle was friends with Jeffrey Epstein's girlfriend. That is a fact. They had been on holiday together. There are numerous pictures of them on a yacht holiday. So the fact the press have never mentioned this, and the mainstream media continue to offer some very questionable protection to the facts, this rings my alarm bells massively.
Think about what that actually means for a moment. We live in an era of relentless media scrutiny. Every movement that William and Catherine make is dissected endlessly. Every minor procedural decision at Buckingham Palace generates days of commentary. And yet, questions about Meghan Markle's pre-royal life, questions that have been circulating for years, that have credible people pointing to credible evidence, have been met with a wall of silence from the mainstream press. Not curiosity, not investigation, silence. Why? That is perhaps the most important question in this entire story. Because when a royal biographer of Tom Bower's stature spends years going through the evidence and concludes that the gaps in Meghan's timeline deserve serious examination, you would expect that to generate serious journalism. Instead, what has largely happened is that the outlets which built their readership on royal coverage quietly looked the other way. People magazine, which Bower himself noted was operating almost as a promotional vehicle for Meghan by a certain point, has historically been one of the most enthusiastic participants in her image management. But here is the thing about cover-ups. They require constant maintenance. They require everyone to keep looking the other way, all the time, indefinitely. And the moment one person with receipts decides they are done being silent, the moment one determined investigator decides that 8 years is long enough, the whole carefully maintained edifice becomes vulnerable. That moment appears to be now.
One of us has been quietly tracking the cover-up for 8 years. So again, these words really matter, Lauren, because what she is suggesting is that for 8 years, there has been a cover-up involving the truth of Meghan Markle, which presumably would also, in some ways, bring in the royal family and the mainstream media and Meghan's PR operation. She then went on to say, collecting sources and filing away testimony from all the people she's treated horribly. They plot, sometimes for years.
I think Meghan Markle will be panicking. I'm predicting it's not going to be a great year for Meghan up.
Let us be precise about what is being reported here, because precision matters when we are talking about something this significant. The investigation that has the Sussex camp reportedly on edge comes from one of the most forensically meticulous independent journalists working in the American media landscape today. Jessica Reed Krause, who writes the influential newsletter House and Habit, has been building a dossier on Meghan Markle since 2018. She has said publicly that she has footage of Meghan in a state of undress. She has said she has been tracking a cover-up for 8 years. She has said she has collected testimony from sources, people who were, in her words, treated horribly by Meghan. And she has said she has material relating to Meghan's Soho House connections and mistreated staff. Now, let us be honest about something. An investigation is exactly that, an investigation. Until the material drops and is scrutinized, we cannot know precisely what it contains or what it ultimately proves. But here is what we can say with absolute confidence. Jessica Reed Krause does not make claims she cannot substantiate. She is a woman who keeps receipts. She is a woman who understands legal exposure. And she has been sitting on this material, patiently, for years. Tom Bower would understand that approach instinctively. His own process of building revenge was similarly methodical. 80 sources, years of interviews, meticulous fact-checking, and lawyers reviewing every page before publication. That is what serious investigative work looks like. It is slow, it is painstaking. And when it arrives, it lands with a weight that PR teams and image managers simply cannot deflect, with a well-timed Instagram post and a strategically positioned photo shoot. Which brings us to the specific detail that is causing the most consternation in certain quarters.
The mainstream media do not make the link that Meghan Markle's best friend works for Ron Burkle. Ron Burkle is, the big cheese at Soho House. Marcus Anderson is so much part of Soho House, they named the rosé wine after him. It's called Lady A. It's incredibly strange that one of Epstein's closest confidants, Ron Burkle, does not get a mention ever. These are strange circles.
Marcus Anderson, remember that name. He has been described as one of Meghan's closest friends, the kind of friend who, reportedly, relocates to be near her wherever she goes. From Los Angeles to Toronto, from London to California, Marcus Anderson has been a constant presence in Meghan Markle's inner circle. He is also deeply embedded in the world of Soho House, the global network of private members' clubs that plays a quietly significant role in this entire narrative. They named a rosé wine after him. That is how central he is to that world. The majority stakeholder of Soho House is Ron Burkle, a billionaire with an extraordinarily wide social network, connections across Hollywood, politics, and the entertainment world. These are the circles within which Meghan Markle operated for years before anyone knew her name. Private clubs, private yachts, private dinners with powerful men. No cameras, no journalists, no record. Tom Bower documented the early years of Meghan's social climb in forensic detail. He described a woman who fought tooth and nail for everything she wanted, every connection, every room, every opening. He described someone who understood, with great sophistication, how to position herself, who to attach herself to, which doors to knock on, and crucially, which version of herself to present to each different audience. The version of herself that the world eventually met the philanthropist, the humanitarian, the quietly noble Duchess of Sussex was years in the making, carefully, painstakingly assembled. And the question that Tom Bower, and now the investigation he helped lay the groundwork for, is circling, comes down to a simple one. What does the original version look like? There is a moment in this story that should have been front-page news. It was in fact reported buried in the Daily Beast, followed up by People magazine, and then it largely disappeared. The mainstream press picked it up briefly and then quietly set it back down again, as if suddenly uncertain it was something they wanted to pursue. The moment was this: the legal team representing Virginia Giuffre in her civil case against Prince Andrew publicly stated that Meghan Markle could be called to testify.
When Virginia Giuffre's lawyer gave that statement and referred to Meghan Markle, the press barely covered it. It's never been referenced post that time. And so you have to ask yourself, why would the press not mention that? Because that's factual, it's evidence. We can pull, those cuttings up and throw back to them, and they never do. Now, I think Virginia's lawyer was sending a very clear warning to Meghan Markle. That is my opinion.
The lawyer in question was David Boies, one of the most formidable and celebrated legal minds in the United States. This is not a man who makes casual public statements. Every word released by a legal team of that caliber is reviewed, considered, and weighted. Nothing is accidental. Nothing is off the cuff. And what David Boies said, publicly and on the record, was extraordinary. He stated that Meghan Markle was a potential deposition subject for 3 specific reasons. First, she lives in the United States, giving his team full legal jurisdiction over her. Second, she was, in his words, a close associate of Prince Andrew for a period of time, and was therefore potentially in a position to have seen relevant behaviour or to have heard others discuss it. Third, and this is the line that deserves to be read extremely carefully, he said, she is someone they could count on to tell the truth. Now, read that again. A lawyer representing the claimant in an abuse case publicly states that Meghan Markle was a close associate of the defendant, that she may have direct knowledge of his conduct, and that they consider her a credible and truthful potential witness. That statement was released. It was reported. And then, to a remarkable degree, it vanished. Tom Bower, who spent years studying the mechanics of Meghan's media management, would not be remotely surprised by that disappearance. He documented in Revenge how effectively the Sussex communications operation, backed by powerful PR machinery, could suppress unflattering stories or redirect media attention. He described Meghan's PR as, in the words of one source, so aggressive and so disconnected from British royal reality that it consistently overreached. But when it worked ruthlessly. The statement from David Boies worked differently to a typical PR problem, however, because it was not a tabloid rumour or an anonymous source. It was a lawyer, in court proceedings, publicly placing Meghan Markle's name into a legal context that connected her to one of the most significant royal scandals in living memory.
Every single word in a legal statement holds weight. We all knew that Meghan hadn't spent a lot of personal time with Andrew once she was in the royal family. That's a fact. So the words that David Boies used were very, very strange. Why go to somewhere like Soho House if, or any private members club? Like, normal people don't do that. We go to the pub. Why go somewhere where you're not allowed cameras and everything?
And that is the detail that refuses to go away. Because here is what we actually know, factually and on the record. Before her marriage to Harry, Meghan Markle was embedded in the world of Soho House. She was not a casual member. She was part of the fabric of that world, attending events, cultivating friendships, accessing rooms and connections through a network that operated deliberately, by design, outside of public view. Private members' clubs serve a specific function in the upper echelons of celebrity and business culture. They are spaces where the normal rules of exposure do not apply. No cameras, No press, no public record of who was there, who spoke to whom, or what arrangements were made. For someone as strategically minded as Meghan Markle, and Tom Bower leaves the reader in absolutely no doubt that she was strategically minded. From a very young age, that kind of environment offers extraordinary opportunities. And the question that is now being asked, with increasing urgency and increasing specificity, is what exactly was happening in those rooms? What was happening on those yachts? And who, in the shadows of Meghan's pre-royal life, was she keeping company with?
Things don't add up, Dan, and often when the mainstream media omit details, there is a game that is being played, and that doesn't work anymore.
The yacht girl claims surrounding Meghan Markle have been circulating for years. They have been whispered about, alluded to, referenced obliquely, and then stepped back from by journalists, commentators, and investigators who understood the legal risk of going further than the available evidence at that moment supported. But what does yacht girl actually mean in this context, and why does it matter? In the years before Suits brought Meghan Markle her first real taste of steady television work, there were significant gaps in her income, gaps in her movements, gaps in her lifestyle, a lifestyle that, for an actress who was not yet famous, was rather grander than her known earnings appeared to justify. She travelled extensively. She was present at elite events. She circulated in rooms where access was expensive, exclusive, and controlled. Tom Bower's examination of Meghan's early years in Revenge painted a picture of relentless, exhausting social climbing. A woman who understood from very early on that, in Hollywood, proximity to power is currency. That the right dinner, the right introduction, the right association could open doors that talent alone might take years to crack. Bower's sources described her as someone who had carefully planned, researched, and positioned herself at every stage of her career. The blind date with Harry, which Meghan publicly claimed she knew nothing about in advance, was, according to sources Bower interviewed, something she had prepared for meticulously. She had, one source told him, gone deeply into his life before they ever met. That level of strategic calculation, applied not just to her royal ambitions but to her pre-royal social ascent, is what underpins everything that is now being investigated.
It looks so cheap, it looks desperate, and it just makes Meghan look like that yacht girl that she was, that we know she was.
Things don't make sense with Meghan Markle. There are some incredible researchers out, and the public also have done so much investigative looking into Meghan Markle.
Because here is what does not add up when you examine it carefully. The years before Suits, during Suits, and in the period between the end of her first marriage and her emergence into the Harry chapter, there are questions about funding, questions about travel, questions about how an actress at a certain level of career success was able to sustain the lifestyle that witnesses and photographs suggest she was living. Jessica Reed Krause has stated plainly that she has material from 2018 that she has been holding. Footage, documents, sources who were in those rooms, on those boats, in those private clubs. And she has stated that Meghan's Soho House connections are central to what she is about to reveal. Tom Bower would not be remotely surprised. In Revenge, he documented how Soho House served as a central hub in Meghan's social ascent, the place where she built connections, cultivated relationships, and positioned herself for the next stage of whatever she was planning. Marcus Anderson, her closest ally within that world, was the human thread connecting her to its most powerful figures. And those figures, as we now know, had connections that extend into some very dark territory indeed. If you want to understand the full weight of what is being alleged here, you need to understand what Tom Bower actually found when he spent years investigating Meghan Markle's past. Because his research, 80 sources, hundreds of interviews, mountains of documentary evidence, provides the essential architecture within which the current investigation must be understood.
She is very clever. Her problem is she's not clever enough. She lacks self-awareness. She doesn't realize she's too clever. That is a terrible dilemma to be in, that not recognizing your own limitations.
Bower's central finding about Meghan Markle can be summarized in a single observation that echoes through every chapter of Revenge. She is someone who has always fought for what she wants, who has always found a way to win, and who has consistently failed to understand that the casualties she leaves behind do not simply disappear. They accumulate, they talk to each other, and eventually, they talk to journalists. Consider the pattern that Bower documented across Meghan's life, long before the royal family ever entered the picture. The childhood friend who described her as a conniving social climber from high school, the colleagues and collaborators who found themselves suddenly discarded when their usefulness to her had expired. The first husband, Trevor Engelson, who reportedly found out his marriage was over when Meghan simply stopped communicating with him. The father who went from beloved patriarch to public enemy in a matter of months, with what many observers considered suspicious precision. The senior palace staff who described her to Bower's sources as treating the institution's employees not as professionals with decades of royal experience, but as obstacles to the execution of her own personal agenda. Tom Bower's conclusion was unambiguous. Meghan Markle has, he wrote, two characters, one concealed, one fictional, and the fictional one has been extraordinarily successful. The carefully managed philanthropy, the tearful interviews, the narrative of victimhood and persecution that she and Harry have spent years burnishing, all of it constructed with the skill of someone who understands exactly how to work an audience.
She is going to be worried about this because, again, the mainstream media have not reported on the fact this rings my alarm bells massively.
What we want to know is why Virginia Giuffre was specifically calling on Meghan to give evidence.
And that statement from the lawyer was so smartly worded. It was vague, and it was vague by design.
Vague by design. That is a phrase worth sitting with, because it applies not just to the legal statement, but to Meghan Markle's entire public presentation. The artful ambiguity, the things left unsaid, the carefully curated narrative that invites sympathy while revealing nothing genuinely verifiable about the years that came before. Tom Bower found, during his research, that Meghan's stories about herself had a curious property. They were frequently impossible to verify, and sometimes actively contradicted by the people who had supposedly witnessed the events she described. Her story about writing to Procter & Gamble as a child to challenge a sexist advertisement, a story she had been telling for years as evidence of her lifelong commitment to advocacy, was, when Vanity Fair's fact-checkers investigated it, something they could not prove. Her claim to have received a personal reply from Hillary Clinton could not be substantiated. Her own father, who knew the truth, quietly confirmed that her account of her campaigning success was, in Bower's words, fictitious. That is not a minor discrepancy, that is a pattern. And it is a pattern that, when placed alongside the questions now being raised about her pre-royal movements, her financial history, and her social connections, begins to look rather less like innocent exaggeration and rather more like a deliberate, systematic construction of a false identity. Which is, of course, precisely what Tom Bower spent years documenting, and precisely what the investigation drawing on his groundwork has apparently spent 8 years accumulating evidence about.
Harry and Meghan should be shaking in their boots right now if they are not already. And they could have had the best of all worlds if they had played their cards right. But this was a route Harry and Meghan decided to go down where they trashed their family, and this is the result.
The story of Meghan Markle is, at its core, a story about choices. The choices she made in her pre-royal years. Choices that are now being scrutinized more intensely than at any point in the past. The choices she and Harry made when they left the royal family, choices that burned the bridges that might otherwise have protected them. And the choices she has continued to make in the years since, as she attempts to rebuild a celebrity profile from a position that grows, by most credible accounts, increasingly precarious. Tom Bower traced the pattern across decades. In Revenge, he documented instance after instance of the same behavior repeating itself. Someone useful to Meghan would be drawn in, elevated, confided in, and then, when the dynamic shifted, or their usefulness expired, they would find themselves discarded. Occasionally with what appeared to be deliberate cruelty. Occasionally with a campaign of reputation management that left the discarded party in a worse position than when they had first encountered her. The list of people who were once close to Meghan Markle, and who are now, to put it politely, no longer among her advocates, is quite striking. Her childhood friends, her college circle, her collaborators from the pre-Suits years, her closest confidantes from the Toronto period, the palace staff who gave years of service and found themselves accused of being insufficiently supportive, her father, her half-sister, her entire extended family on the Markle side. And now, though this is a more delicate proposition, the question of what the people she encountered in her Soho House years, on those private members' club yachts, in those rooms where cameras were not allowed, might now choose to say.
Collecting sources and filing away testimony from all the people she's treated horribly. There are so many people who want to speak out.
I mean, I love an investigation. I'm often up till 3 a.m. going down rabbit holes myself, so I cannot wait to see this.
She will be absolutely terrified about the idea that this house and habit investigation is finally going to drop.
Terrified is a strong word, but it is entirely plausible when you understand the architecture of what appears to be coming. An investigator who has spent 8 years building a case does not come forward without being confident in what she has. She has described footage. She has described documented connections. She has described testimony from multiple sources who were in proximity to Meghan Markle during specific periods of her life. And she has described a cover-up, systematic, deliberate, and maintained over many years that she says she now has the evidence to expose. For someone whose entire post-royal brand depends on the continued credibility of her self-constructed image, the humanitarian, the progressive voice, the authentic alternative to stuffy royal tradition, the prospect of that image being publicly dismantled by someone with receipts must be, to use the technical term, absolutely catastrophic. Sunshine Sachs, the PR firm that Meghan has reportedly re-engaged after a period of working with other representation, has significant experience in crisis management. They are skilled practitioners of what the industry calls narrative control. But there is a particular kind of story that narrative control struggles to contain, and that is a story supported by documentation, footage, and multiple corroborating witnesses. You cannot spin away a video. You cannot discredit 8 years of collected testimony with a single well-placed exclusive in a friendly publication.
We all know Harry is very miserable right now. I think the signs are there that Harry wants to get back to his royal life. He needs to get back to what is familiar to him.
The problem you've got here in a relationship with Meghan and Harry is this is a boy that was pretty much traumatized by media presence when he was little. He didn't really want any of this publicity. He was always attacking photographers. She's someone, ever since she was on the red carpet, who's craved publicity.
Where is Harry in all of this? That is the question that haunts every conversation about the Sussex saga at this point. Because Prince Harry, the 40-year-old man who walked away from one of the most privileged positions in the world, who cut ties with his father, his brother, his extended family, his country, and his identity is now watching from Montecito as the woman he staked everything on faces an investigation she apparently cannot simply make disappear. Tom Bower, who examined Harry's psychology with considerable care in Revenge, concluded that Harry is someone who was badly advised at crucial moments, and who, by the time he understood the depth of the situation he had placed himself in, had already burned the bridges that might have allowed him to retreat to safer ground. Bower wrote that what Harry fears, among other things, is the growing sense that his future has been profoundly narrowed by choices made in the heat of passion and resentment, choices that Meghan, whether consciously or not, was instrumental in shaping. Harry's relationship with the truth is itself a complicated matter, of course. Spare, his memoir, made claims that were disputed by multiple members of the royal family and by sources who were present at the events he described. His public statements have, on several occasions, been contradicted by the documentary record. But, and this is worth noting carefully, the specific questions now being raised about Meghan's pre-royal life are questions that Harry, by all accounts, may not be fully equipped to answer. Because if the people who knew Meghan in her Soho House years are correct, she was not the person Harry believes he met.
Harry and mostly Meghan, it seems, are actually really obsessed with the titles. Meghan and Harry care a lot about those titles, and they say that they don't, but they clearly do.
You've got to look at the way that Harry has actually been badly advised, because after he lost that case in London against the British government to get armed protection.
The tragedy of Harry's situation, and it is genuinely tragic, whatever one thinks of the choices he made, is that he appears to have committed to Meghan absolutely, at enormous personal cost, based on his understanding of who she is. And if that understanding is built on a foundation that the current investigation may challenge, then everything he sacrificed has a rather different quality to it. Tom Bower expressed this with quiet devastation in the final pages of Revenge. The casualties in Meghan's life are irrelevant to her, he wrote. Whether a father, old friends, a first husband, there will always be casualties. And the outstanding question was simply when Harry would become one of them. That question has not gone away. If anything, the current investigation makes it more urgent.
Meghan is doing her best to make this Hollywood comeback. Meghan believes her best approach is to just keep on accepting any invite, even if she's not really invited invited to an event.
She's attached herself to Emma like a Siamese twin.
She's friends with the moms rather than the stars themselves. She's friends with Kris Jenner. She's friends with Tina Knowles. She's not friends with Beyonce anymore. She's not friends with Kim Kardashian.
And this is where the story becomes genuinely fascinating from a strategic perspective. Because while the investigation is building, while the questions about her past are becoming louder and more specific, Meghan Markle is doing what Meghan Markle always does in a crisis. She is performing. Red carpet appearances at events she has a tenuous connection to, at best. Photographs carefully positioned to suggest relevance and celebrity adjacency. A social media presence managed with the precision of someone who understands that in the absence of genuine cultural power, the simulation of cultural power is the next best thing. This is, Tom Bower would note, entirely consistent with the behaviour he documented across Meghan's entire adult life. When the pressure mounts, perform harder. When the narrative threatens to escape your control, flood the zone with alternative imagery. But here is what is different now, compared to the years when this strategy was more effective. The cultural appetite for the manufactured Sussex narrative is significantly diminished. The celebrity world that once embraced them with enthusiasm, the Spotify deals, the Netflix contracts, the speaking circuit, the galas, and the glamorous appearances has grown considerably cooler. Beyoncé and Kim Kardashian, names that once appeared in proximity to hers with some regularity, are conspicuously absent from the current chapter. The friendships that conferred status have not survived the years of drama, controversy, and what multiple sources have described as the exhausting experience of being in Meghan's orbit. What remains is the second tier, the mothers of famous people rather than the famous people themselves, the supporting cast of Hollywood rather than its leads, and the increasingly frantic quality of Meghan's public appearances, the pushing of assistants out of camera shots, the strategic positioning at events she was not quite invited to in the way her presence implied, speaks to a woman who understands, on some level, that her window is narrowing. Tom Bower concluded that Meghan lacks, fundamentally, the self-awareness to see herself as others see her. She is clever enough to construct the strategy, but not quite clever enough to understand when it has stopped working. And the gap between what she believes she is projecting and what the world actually sees has been widening steadily for some time.
I absolutely despise philanthropy when it's used like this, because this really is a networking event for all the elites, isn't it? I am sick of seeing Meghan Markle and Prince Harry turn up to anything that they feel will propel them forwards. Remember what your mother did, Prince Harry. She was doing the charity work that was not cool, the charity work that people shied away from.
There is a particular kind of dishonesty that is more troubling than straightforward lying, and it is the dishonesty of performance, of presenting a curated version of virtue, staged, photographed, publicised, while the substance behind it either does not exist or does not survive close examination. Tom Bower documented this quality in Meghan's approach to philanthropy and public service, long before she was a royal. The carefully staged photos with villagers in Rwanda, each pose followed by a change of clothing, each image meticulously curated for maximum emotional impact. The campaign stories that could not be verified by fact-checkers, the humanitarian credentials that were presented with such conviction, and that crumbled so quickly under the scrutiny that Bower's 80 sources provided. And now, in her post-royal phase, the same template continues. Appearances at the right galas, associations with the right causes, the various philanthropic adjacencies that allow her to circulate in elite spaces under the cover of charity, while, as her critics note with considerable sharpness, the actual business ventures she has launched have struggled to demonstrate meaningful impact. The American Riviera Orchard Jam, the As Ever brand, products that generate attention, but whose deeper commercial reality has been a source of considerable amusement and concern, depending on one's perspective. Meanwhile, as the critics point out, Archwell, the charitable organisation that was supposed to be the beating heart of the Sussex mission, employed, by credible accounts, a workforce that was overwhelmingly white, from a woman who has built a significant portion of her public identity around racial justice and inclusion. This is a rather extraordinary discrepancy, and it is the kind of discrepancy that, in the context of an investigation that is apparently looking at every aspect of Meghan's life with fresh eyes, takes on a different quality entirely. Diana, by contrast, and this comparison is not made lightly, did not perform charity. She lived it. She sat with the suffering, touched the untouchable, and never, not once, changed outfits between poses. The charity she did was often the charity that was unpopular, the causes that did not photograph beautifully, that did not enhance a personal brand, that were genuinely difficult and costly in the most human sense. That distinction between genuine service and performed service is one that the public, Bauer noted, understands instinctively, even when they cannot always articulate why something feels hollow. Meghan Markle feels hollow to an increasing number of people, and the investigation that is apparently approaching may provide the documentary evidence to explain, at last, precisely why.
This has been Meghan Markle's MO from the beginning. She wants all of the privileges that go along with an identity, but she doesn't want any of the responsibility. She wants the tiara. She doesn't want the public service.
And this is utter bullshit. I am so sick of seeing celebrities just care about how they line their pockets, how they preserve their reputation.
But let us consider, for a moment, the longer view. Because this story is not only about Meghan Markle and what she may or may not have done in the years before anyone was paying attention. It is also about what happens to Archie and Lilibet, 6-year-old and 3-year-old children, as the parents who chose to place them at the centre of an ongoing, escalating public controversy navigate an increasingly turbulent landscape. Archie is now 6 years old. Lilibet is 3. They have been raised in California, largely removed from the royal family, introduced to the public in carefully managed increments that maximize their value to their parents' brand, while their father simultaneously insists he wants to protect them from exactly the kind of public scrutiny their mothers. Strategy invites. Tom Bauer captured the fundamental tension in this arrangement with devastating clarity in Revenge. One parent who, by all accounts, would prefer his children to live a quieter life, and one parent who understands instinctively that children are a powerful tool in the arsenal of public image management. That tension does not resolve easily, and as the investigation into Meghan's past draws closer to public disclosure, the question of what it means for those two children who had no choice in any of this becomes more pressing. They did not choose their parents' fame. They did not choose to be introduced to the public on a Netflix documentary. They did not choose the ongoing saga that their parents have sustained, with remarkable energy, for the better part of a decade. And they will, at some point, be old enough to read what has been written, watch what has been filmed, and form their own understanding of the choices made in their names. The legacy question matters. The royal family, as Tom Bauer documented extensively, has survived scandal, abdication, war, and profound institutional challenge. It endures because it adapts, because it maintains a core of dignity that weathers individual storms. What Harry and Meghan have done and continue to do poses a particular kind of challenge to that endurance. Not because they left, but because they have been so loudly, so persistently, so publicly committed to the project of damaging what they left behind. William and Catherine have, by every credible account, watched all of this with the quiet, steady patience of people who understand that they represent something far larger than any individual drama. Their children, 12-year-old George, 9-year-old Charlotte, and 7-year-old Louis, are being raised with clarity about what it means to serve, to show up, to do the difficult, unglamorous, genuinely important work that comes with royal life. The contrast with the Sussex approach to parenthood and public life is, frankly, rather striking. The royal family, by and large, does not respond to this kind of story. That is not weakness, it is strategy. And it is a strategy that has served them extraordinarily well over centuries of precisely the kind of crisis management that would exhaust any conventional organisation. William and Catherine, in particular, have reached a level of disciplined dignity in their public presentation that makes the Sussex chaos look, by contrast, all the more chaotic. While Meghan and Harry generate controversy, counter-controversy, leaks, counter-leaks, PR manoeuvres and public positioning, William and Catherine simply get on with it. The school runs, the engagements, the careful, sustained, genuine commitment to the institutions they serve.
Prince William doubles down. According to multiple sources, it's now a matter of when, not if, he strips Prince Harry and Meghan Markle of their royal title.
William is planning to act very decisively when he becomes king to take away the titles, the HRHs, once and for all from all non-working royals, which will have the silver lining for him of removing them from Harry and Meghan.
And William, by all credible accounts, is watching the current situation with the quiet, focused attention of someone who has been waiting patiently for the right moment to act. Tom Bauer wrote that William would be ruthless in what he considers necessary changes to the monarchy. That word ruthless is important. Not cruel, not personal. Ruthless, in the way that a future king must sometimes be. Clear-eyed about what the institution needs, regardless of the personal cost. The question of titles remains live. The HRH, the Sussex designation, the royal connection that Meghan and Harry simultaneously claim to have rejected and continue, observers note, to trade on whenever it serves their interests. William, who has a formidable sense of institutional responsibility and a long memory, is understood to have been forming his views on this question for some time. And the more the Sussex story escalates, the more investigations are launched, the more questions are asked, the more the underlying narrative phrase, the more inevitable that resolution becomes. The palace itself has maintained its characteristic silence on all of this. No statements, no confirmations, no hints of official reaction to the investigation that is reportedly building. This is, of course, deliberate. The institution does not respond to gossip, even when the gossip is supported by 8 years of documentary evidence. It waits, it watches. And when it acts decisively. There is something almost classical about the Meghan Markle story when you step back far enough to see its shape. The ancient Greeks had a word for it: hubris. The belief that you have successfully escaped the consequences of your actions. The confidence in some cases. The absolute certainty that the version of yourself you have constructed will hold indefinitely. That the people who know the truth will stay silent. That the investigators will eventually give up. That the wall you have built around your past will hold. Tom Bower has spent his career studying people who believed that. Politicians, business titans, public figures who were convinced they had managed their narratives completely. And he has spent his career demonstrating that they had not. In Revenge, he wrote something that has stayed with many readers as perhaps the most precise summary of his central finding. She will always find a way in which she thinks she can win. The casualties are irrelevant. But the casualties do not think they are irrelevant. And eventually, they find each other. 8 years is a long time to collect testimony. 8 years is a long time to track a cover-up. 8 years is a long time for the people who were in those rooms, on those yachts, in those private clubs where cameras were not allowed, a long time for them to decide that silence no longer serves them. The scorpion metaphor that has been used in connection with this investigation is not accidental. Scorpions are patient. They do not rush. They wait until the conditions are right. And when they move with precision. Meghan Markle has been performing, publicly and relentlessly, as if the investigation does not exist, as if the questions about her past do not have answers, as if the 8 years of collected evidence will somehow evaporate before it reaches the public. That performance, that commitment to the fiction is, in itself, telling, because it tells you that she knows what is in that folder, she knows what the footage shows, and she knows that when it drops, the constructed narrative, the humanitarian, the progressive, the authentic voice will face its most significant test.
The royal family would not be coming to Harry's rescue. They would not be funding a divorce to any extent. And they, at this point, wouldn't really care what Meghan tried to say or do, because Meghan has so discredited herself as a liar, a cheat, and a phone.
Harry and Meghan should be shaking in their boots right now.
The relationship between the Sussexes and the royal family has long since passed the point of casual estrangement. What exists now is something more formal, more settled, and more final. The family that Harry grew up in, that celebrated his birth, that surrounded him through grief and joy, and the impossible pressures of royal life, has reached a collective conclusion about what he and Meghan represent, and that conclusion is not charitable. Tom Bower documented the deterioration of those relationships with care, the family members who were closer to Harry before Meghan, and who have steadily, quietly withdrawn, the institutional loyalty that protected him for so long but which has limits that have now been reached, the palace aides who endured years of difficult working conditions under Meghan, who saw colleagues leave, who watched the institution they served be publicly attacked in a series of increasingly aggressive media maneuvers, and who, by most accounts, feel absolutely no inclination to soften their private assessments of what happened. King Charles, who has managed the relationship with his younger son with a patience that has sometimes appeared almost saintly, is not immune from the accumulating weight of everything that has happened. He has tried. He has reached out. He has, by multiple accounts, attempted to find a path to some kind of reconciliation. And Harry, influenced by or simply choosing not to challenge the position that Meghan has consistently maintained, has not taken that path. The family is not in close touch with Harry now. Those who were once closer to him have withdrawn further. Many have nothing to do with him whatsoever. And as the investigation into his wife's past moves closer to public disclosure, the likelihood of any meaningful rapprochement does not appear to be increasing. If anything, what is coming may make the distance permanent. There is a moment in every significant royal story, and this has been one of the most significant in decades, where it becomes necessary to zoom out and ask, what does all of this actually mean? Not just for the individuals involved, but for the broader questions of truth, accountability, and the extraordinary power that wealth, celebrity, and strategic PR can exercise over public knowledge. The Meghan Markle story is, at its heart, a story about information management, about who controls the narrative, about which stories get told, which get suppressed, and why. Tom Bower spent years fighting to tell a story that powerful forces very much wanted not to be told. He succeeded. His book became an international bestseller, and the portrait it painted of a woman with two characters, one concealed, one fictional, has proven extraordinarily durable, because it is built on verifiable evidence rather than on anonymous speculation. What is happening now is potentially the next chapter of that same story. 8 years of investigation, 8 years of collected evidence. Sources who were in those rooms, on those boats, in those clubs, people who, for one reason or another, decided that silence was no longer the right choice. The mainstream media has, as we have discussed, been remarkably reluctant to touch this material, whether from legal caution, commercial consideration, or something more deliberate. The questions about Meghan Markle's pre-royal life have not received the serious journalistic attention they arguably deserve. But investigative journalism does not only happen in mainstream newsrooms, it happens in newsletters, on independent platforms, in the work of people like Jessica Reed Krause, who are not dependent on the same commercial relationships that constrain traditional media. And when that work drops, when the 8 years of collected testimony becomes public, the mainstream press will face a choice: cover it honestly and comprehensively, as the story deserves, or continue to look away, and in doing so, confirm everything that independent investigators have been saying about the protection being offered to Meghan Markle's narrative.
The public, quite rightly, have a lot of unanswered questions for Meghan Markle. We want to know why she is allowed to cause the damage I believe she has gone out of her way to try and do to the royal family. She behaves in an incredibly entitled way, and things don't match up. And often when the mainstream media omit details, there is a game that is being played, and that doesn't work anymore. No, thank you. We'll get to the bottom of it.
We'll get to the bottom of it. That is not a threat. That is not tabloid sensationalism. That is the quiet, patient confidence of people who have been tracking this story for years and who believe, with good reason, that the answers are finally coming. Tom Bower believed that too. His investigation into Meghan's character and history, documented across hundreds of pages of meticulously sourced biography, was not the end of the story. It was the foundation for everything that is now being built on top of it. The framework that makes sense of the connections, the timeline, the questions about money and travel and circles of influence and rooms where cameras were not allowed. When the House and Habit investigation finally drops, it will land into that framework. And the world will have the context thanks to Tom Bower's years of painstaking, rigorous work to understand fully what it means. Meghan Markle has spent years constructing a very particular version of herself. The question that has always hung over that construction, the question that the investigator with 8 years of receipts is apparently about to answer, is what she was before she decided to build it. And so we come to the end of today's story. But I want to leave you with a question, actually. 2 questions that I think deserve your honest reflection. The first is this: if the investigation does drop, and it reveals that the version of Meghan Markle we were all sold, the compassionate humanitarian, the progressive royal, the woman who said she just wanted to help, was built on a foundation that does not survive examination, what does that mean for the people who believed in her? The ordinary people, many of them women, who genuinely thought she represented something new and hopeful. Is there not something rather sad in that, not for Meghan, but for them? And the second question is perhaps even more personal. How do you feel about the fact that this investigation exists at all? That it has taken 8 years of one woman's determined, patient effort to bring to the surface questions that the mainstream media should have been asking all along? Does that not tell you something important about who, in our world, is actually held to account and who is not? I would genuinely love to know what you think. Leave your thoughts in the comments below, because this community has some of the most thoughtful and informed perspectives I have ever encountered, and conversations like this one deserve to continue. If you found today's video valuable, and I do hope you did, please take a moment to like it, because it tells YouTube that this content matters, and it helps more people find us. If you are not yet subscribed, please do hit that button now. We are here every single day with the stories that deserve to be told, the questions that deserve to be asked, and the royal coverage that respects your intelligence and your investment in this extraordinary ongoing story. Thank you, truly, for being here, for watching, and for caring about getting to the truth.